This week has revolved around decisions. In America, voters weren't short of advice.
Go and vote.
Change the future.
Get off your couch and vote!
And how Americans voted may influence who ends up running for president. In Egypt, the world's countries gathered once again to try and decide what to do about climate change.
We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator.
Then there's Elon Musk's decision to buy Twitter, which continues to play out minute by minute.
It's not so much the concern of, the hellscape right now, it's the chaos.
There's Rishi Sunak's decision to put Sir Gavin Williamson into the cabinet again, an idea that bit the dust this week.
I obviously regret appointing someone who has had to resign in these circumstances.
And then there's a decision taken in 2010, which keeps coming back. Because this week, former FIFA chief Sepp Blatter said the World Cup in Qatar is a mistake. Decisions and consequences, we'll look at them both. Hello, welcome. So, 5 stories for us, all revolving around decisions. And we'll start with the ones being taken by American voters. Because in this week's midterms, America's balance of power was up for grabs.
It's election night across America. 50 states, millions of votes.
Inflation's terrible, gas prices are up, everything's falling apart right now.
For me, my right to bodily autonomy is on the line.
Breaking news. CBS News rates the House as leaning Republican.
The Senate, as you say, really is too close to call.
Florida is where woke goes to die.
Never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue.
So what happened?
Definitely not a Republican wave, that's for darn sure.
Good afternoon. It's a good day, I think, for democracy.
Are you guys watching the fake news anymore? Turn around and tell them, we're not watching you guys anymore. We don't care what you say.
Now, in simple terms, this is where we are. Republicans are on track to win back the lower house of Congress, the House of Representatives. The upper house, the Senate, well, that's still in play. Overall, Democrats did well in state governor races, and it looks like turnout was high. In short, this didn't meet Republicans' expectations. And what's at stake here is what President Biden can and can't get done in the next 2 years, and where America's heading with a presidential election on the way. And that goes some of the way to explaining that both sides combined were forecast to spend $9.7 billion. To put that in context, that's more than double the last midterms. The most expensive contest was Pennsylvania's Senate race, with over $373 million spent, according to one estimate. That's roughly $68 per voter. And if that's the cost, next, let's pick out some of the results that are particularly important, starting in Florida, where the Republican Ron DeSantis won re-election as governor.
We have embraced freedom. We have maintained law and order. We have protected the rights of parents. We have respected our taxpayers, and we reject woke ideology.
This mattered for a couple of reasons. DeSantis won by a landslide, which, if he wants to take on Donald Trump for the presidential nomination, could give him momentum. Second, throughout his campaign, he talked about the economy, as did many Republicans. And exit polling suggests this was a decent calculation. High inflation was voters' #1 issue. But crucially, it wasn't the only issue. Let's turn to Pennsylvania, because there, in a race for the Senate, Democrat John Fetterman was the victor.
I'm proud of what we ran on. Protecting a woman's right to choose. Raising our minimum wage. Fighting the union way of life. Healthcare is a fundamental human right.
We heard John Fetterman talking about abortion rights there, and since back in June, when the Supreme Court removed the constitutional right to abortion, Democrats have campaigned on the issue. Polling suggests it was the second biggest concern for voters, above crime, above gun policy and immigration. One political scientist told the BBC that abortion rights actually helped the Democrats stave off a red wave. Democrats campaigned on another issue too, American democracy, because the midterms as a whole were in some ways a test of Donald Trump's false claim about the 2020 election being stolen. And the BBC's analysed the performance of candidates for the Senate, House and governorships who've publicly denied that result. 124 of them won their seats, 40 lost. Now, a lot of those wins were in safe Republican seats, but in the more closely contested states, Democrats did well against them, like in Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin. Voters rejected election-denying candidates for governor. And those Republican losses matter because many of them were endorsed by Donald Trump, and so these results have the potential to dent his standing. Watching all of this, one Fox News journalist tweeted, "GOP source tells me if it wasn't clear before, it should be now. We have a Trump problem." Then this is the front page of the once Trump-friendly New York Post, owned by Rupert Murdoch, saying Trumpty Dumpty had a great fall. Or the Wall Street Journal, also owned by Rupert Murdoch, concluded Trump is the Republican Party's biggest loser. And they may not be saying so, but we can be confident both Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis will be noting all of this, because midterms always connect back to who's president and who might want to be. To unpack this, Mark Landler, the New York Times bureau chief in London, came in to see us. He's a former White House correspondent during the Obama and the Trump years.
Okay, how about one?
New York Times? New York Times?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Say thank you, Mr. Trump.
I think I'll stop short of that.
Normally the midterms are about how is the current president doing, but somehow these midterms have also become about how the last president is doing.
Yeah, that's right. And that obviously has to do with the unique circumstances we find ourselves in, where the ex-president is this constant vocal participant in the political life of the country and still very much has a vice-like grip over the Republican Party.
Well, I think if they win, I should get all the credit, and if they lose, I should not be blamed at all.
Classic Donald Trump. He knows he's being very, that was very characteristic of him. And, you know, he's not completely wrong in the sense that I am sure if the eventual outcome here is very bad for the Republicans, even within the party, other people will find other people to blame. There'll be plenty of other targets.
But there were some candidates which he really came behind, and surely those are test cases to some degree of his ability to win elections.
Oh yeah, no question. There are a number of cases across the country where Trump-endorsed candidates didn't win their races, and for that he will be, if not blamed, it will be viewed as a reflection of perhaps his weakened state. There's still a wide expectation he's going to run. What is interesting in the wake of the midterms, though, is that there was a sense of a kind of a different atmosphere, a slightly different outcome than people expected, and he doesn't go into that announcement with the head of steam he might have had the Republicans done better.
And perhaps one of the reasons for that is this next man we're going to see.
The woke agenda has caused millions of Americans to leave these jurisdictions for greener pastures. Now,
well, he's sort of like Trump without the crazy. I mean, it's a very populist message. The first time he was elected governor, it was by quite a narrow margin. This time, he swept to one of the biggest victories of the whole night. He emerges from these midterms as a much stronger figure. And if he chooses to, a really formidable rival to Donald Trump.
We have the worst inflation in 4 decades, the worst collapse in real wages in 40 years.
So it was a sad night at Fox. On several grounds, by several benchmarks, it should have been a much worse night for the Democrats.
That is a searing indictment of the Republican Party.
Inflation is a major concern that people have. Gas prices, food prices, all that stuff. President Biden has a 42% approval rating, and you wouldn't expect on the face of it for any president at 42% to have the second best midterm election outcome in the last 25 or 30 years. And yet, There are other reasons that change the outcome.
And they are?
Well, most notably, I would argue, the Roe versus Wade decision in the Supreme Court last summer, which had the effect of really mobilizing and galvanizing Democratic voters, particularly women.
This is a place where fundamental rights are protected and women can make their own decisions about their bodies.
Turnout is a critical part of any Democratic victory, and this did turn out people.
Our democracy has been tested in recent years, but with their votes, the American people have spoken.
How do you assess where all of this leaves him?
Well, had he really had his clock cleaned, had he lost badly, had he been shellacked, to use Obama's phrase, there would be
some good phrases I'm learning here.
There would be an immediate debate about whether it was time for him to stand aside, not run for re-election. Instead, what we're hearing is you have now an emboldened president.
Buddy Joe Biden, congratulations, man. Congratulations.
And it actually presents the Democrats with a bit of a quandary, because if you think that an 80-year-old Joe Biden is too old to run for re-election, you're now in a more difficult position of perhaps preventing that from happening or looking for alternatives, because he's come out of this in a slightly stronger position.
Thanks for coming to see us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Ross. It was really good.
I'm pretty sure you'll have seen COP27 in the news. It's the latest global gathering to try and thrash out what we're all going to do about climate change. Last year, it was in Glasgow. This time, it's Egypt. But this is a conversation that's been going on for years.
It is mankind and his activities which are changing the environment of our planet in damaging and dangerous ways.
The Earth Summit has opened in Rio.
The spirit of Rio must embody the full awareness of the fragility of our planet.
It's so decided.
There are still hard challenges ahead.
Relief at the end of this marathon session. There's quite a gap between the aims of this conference and its outcomes.
It will take more than this to definitively tackle climate change.
It would take more. And in 2015, a new goal was set, 1.5.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
We'd never seen a global climate deal like Paris before. Almost every country in the world signed up to a common goal to limit the global average temperature rise to well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Ideally, though, the limit would be 1.5 degrees. 1.5. We'd hear it again and again. This is what the world needed to do, we were told. But 7 years on from Paris, has 1.5 gone? Is it actually possible anymore? Last month, the UN Environment Programme said there's no credible pathway to 1.5 degrees in place. It says with current policies, we're on track for 2.8 degrees of warming by the end of the century. If all carbon cutting pledges are implemented, well, then it would be between 2.4 and 2.6. That's the UN's projection. Here's another. The blue line here is where current policies get us. The yellow shows pledges and targets included too. The red, that's what's needed for 1.5. It's not close. That said, progress has been made. When the Paris deal was done in 2015, global warming was projected at 3.5 degrees. As we've seen, that's come down significantly. And the US climate envoy John Kerry thinks 1.5 remains possible.
It's absolutely accurate to say that currently, on the current track, no, we will not make it. But that's not to say that if countries stepped up and did more, we couldn't make it.
Getting countries to step up, though, is, of course, what's proving difficult. But John Kerry has a broader point, that this isn't 1.5 or bust, that every tenth of a degree matters. And that was backed up by a major UN report on the difference between global warming of 1.5 and of 2 degrees. It says 99% of coral reefs, for example, would be wiped out at 2 degrees of warming. Or there's global sea levels. They'd rise by about 10 centimetres more at 2 degrees. And keeping to 1.5 means that 10 million fewer people would be exposed to the risks of flooding. And to be clear, this isn't just about the future. Right now, the world is over 1.1 degrees warmer than pre-industrial levels, and that's already impacting our weather, with more heat waves, more droughts, more floods. And at this week's climate conference in Egypt, the UN Secretary General put it this way.
That 1.5 degree goal is on life support and the machines are rattling. We are getting dangerously close to the point of no return.
These are difficult messages to hear, but that's not to say there's no good news about climate action. To understand this better, we got in touch with climate scientist Professor Emily Shukborough. Thanks for coming to see us.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so the picture around 1.5 is, to say the very least, difficult, but are there things that we can concentrate on, things that we can highlight where we can at least say, look, some serious progress is being made?
It's difficult, right? So there are glimmers of optimism within what's otherwise quite a bleak
Tell me about the glimmers.
So the glimmers of optimism are in terms of the rollout of renewable energy technologies globally. If you look at the only graphs in the climate world that you see that are going in the right direction as opposed to the wrong direction is the global adoption of photovoltaics, solar energy, the global adoption of wind energy, the global adoption of electric vehicles, and similarly, the only graphs that are going down in the right direction are the price of all those things.
Which countries do you look at and think, my goodness, they really are making progress now on renewables?
Well, actually, the UK is not doing badly. So the UK, if you look at UK emissions over the last 30 years, they've pretty much halved at the same time as the economy has grown. It's basically because we don't use coal to generate our electricity any longer. I sit in a university, and if I look at the technologies that are being developed, so battery technologies, if it's looking at greening industrial processes, green steel, for example, is really developing now. These are all happening, and that's our path to solving all of this. It's doable. So we shouldn't give up on 1.5 because a plan could be put together to get there if only there was the global commitment.
Thanks for coming to see us.
That's okay.
Now, I want to talk about the football. On Thursday, Gareth Southgate announced the England squad that he'll be taking to Qatar. The Men's Football World Cup is a week or so away, and normally at this stage we'd be entirely focused on the squads, the tactics, the soap opera of it all. Not so much this time. On Monday, the former head of FIFA, Sepp Blatter, said that holding the World Cup in Qatar is a mistake.
The World Cup with 32 teams is a big organization which needs also a big country. Qatar is too small to do that.
Also on Tuesday, a Qatari World Cup ambassador described homosexuality as damage in the mind. Qatar says everyone's welcome at the World Cup, but the furore has been growing this week, and one question keeps coming up. How did a country of 3 million people with summer temperatures above 45 degrees, where homosexuality is illegal, get the tournament? Qatar has never qualified for a World Cup, let alone hosted one, but that would change in 2010.
The winner to organize the 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
That decision was taken by FIFA's executive committee, and in 2014, one of those who voted, Michel Platini, told the BBC why he chose Qatar.
And I decided that it's time that we go in one part of the world, they never receive the World Cup. I am for that, is my conviction.
That was one reason FIFA chose Qatar, but there may have been others. Ahead of the vote, two of the committee were excluded after a Sunday Times investigation alleged they'd offered to sell their votes, something they denied. The remaining members chose Qatar over the US, which had been the favourite. Then in 2011, the Sunday Times reported that 2 other members of the committee had been paid $1.5 million each to vote for Qatar. They denied it. Days later, an email leaked, and in it, FIFA's then General Secretary refers to Qatar's official on the voting committee. He writes, he thought you can buy FIFA, as they bought the World Cup. Jerome Valcke would say afterwards that didn't refer to bribes. But by 2012, a FIFA inquiry was underway.
People focus on the winners, right? But how did that process go? And did anyone in that process violate the rules?
Now, that inquiry would conclude that the votes hadn't been bought, but it did find potentially problematic conduct of specific individuals as part of Qatar's bid. And by this point, it emerged the FBI had been investigating FIFA for years. In response to a US request in 2015, Swiss police carried out these dawn raids in Zurich, where FIFA's based. The FBI declared that undisclosed and illegal payments, kickbacks and bribes became a way of doing business at FIFA, though that wasn't a specific reference to Qatar getting the World Cup. We do, though, know that 11 of the 22 committee members who took this decision have, for various reasons, been fined, suspended, banned or indicted since then. 2 of them were convicted, but not in connection to Qatar. And 12 years on from the vote, Qatar denies doing anything illegal or unethical. But this week, Sepp Blatter had more to say about this. Of course, it was also about money, he says. That's a reference to countries, not individuals. He hinted, without evidence, that a sale of French fighter jets to Qatar may have been eased by negotiations over the World Cup bid. That link has not been established, nor is it uncommon for the awarding of large sporting events to have a political dimension. But this is the man who ran FIFA at the time, implying that the decision may have been connected to selling military hardware. And we should also remember, as the BBC sport editor Dan Rowan puts it, that Blatter's time in charge of FIFA became defined by corruption. And so, while FIFA and Qatar continue to deny doing anything wrong, the players are preparing to travel to the tournament, and questions remain about why it's being held in Qatar. Another decision that's been playing out through the week is Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter and all of the changes that he's planning. To be honest, sometimes it's been hard to keep up, but we've done our best. Elon Musk put a car in space. He brought rockets back down to Earth. He gets remarkable things done. And when, in 2017, Elon Musk tweeted, "I love Twitter," someone replied, "You should buy it then." 2 weeks ago, he did. And, well...
Elon Musk's second week of Twitter ownership is proving to be just as helter-skelter as the first.
2 weeks back, Elon Musk posted this video of him arriving at Twitter's HQ. Let that sink in, he told us. 2 days later, he announced comedy is now legal on Twitter, which may be some people's way of describing what's happened since. Mr. Musk's first move was on Twitter's blue ticks. These verify who someone is and denote some level of importance. Elon Musk didn't like it, calling it a lords and peasants system. Instead, he said anyone will be able to buy a tick. Power to the people, he tweeted. Blue for $8 a month. And this people power is, of course, also a new revenue stream. Musk added to all complainers, please continue complaining, but it will cost $8. And he added that the idea for charging for insults and arguments came from Monty Python.
I just paid.
No, you didn't.
I did.
Listening to the demands for $8, David Frum of The Atlantic urged Mr. Musk to stop because it makes you sound like an angry squeegee man. The advice, though, has gone unheeded. And in the middle of last week, things moved up a gear. Musk posted about an unsubstantiated conspiracy theory about the hammer attack that hospitalized Paul Pelosi, husband of senior US Democrat Nancy Pelosi. There's a tiny possibility there might be more to this story than meets the eye, he said. There was also more than a tiny possibility that this would amplify the misinformation, and though the tweet was deleted, That's exactly what happened.
Trending on Twitter is the lie about this guy, because Elon Musk pushed it.
By this point, the Musk Twitter experience was not to everyone's taste.
For advertisers, this is all about risk. They're working with someone who is inherently unpredictable in a high stakes, high profile situation, so they're pulling out.
Elon Musk blamed activist groups for the fall in ad revenue, insisting nothing has changed with content moderation. Something had changed though. Musk was in charge and he was tweeting and acting at speed. Thousands of jobs were cut to save money. And then, across the weekend, people started changing their profiles to Elon Musk to highlight the risk of impersonation if anyone can get a blue tick. US comedian Kathy Griffin did this. On Monday, her account was suspended. And for a moment, talk of comedy being legal was paused as Elon Musk explained, going forward, any Twitter handles engaging in impersonation without clearly specifying parody will be permanently suspended. And while the self-proclaimed free speech absolutist was fleshing out the details of his content moderation rules, Kathy Griffin then appeared again via her late mother's account, tweeting, "I'm back from the grave." And Monday wasn't done there. Elon Musk wanted to talk politics too. On the eve of the midterms, he posted, "Shared power curbs the worst excesses of both parties. Therefore, I recommend voting for a Republican Congress." And while Elon Musk was worrying about curbing the worst excesses in Washington, nothing was curbing his Twitter account, with rival social network Mastodon labelled Masturbatodon. Watching all of this was Dan Primack of Axios.
It's not so much the concern of, the hellscape right now, it's the chaos. He seems to be largely making this up as it goes along.
Elon Musk has emphasised the work he's doing on bots and spam. And on Wednesday, he also informed us Twitter will do lots of dumb things in the coming months. That process may already be up and running, but this is Elon Musk. He uses disruption to great effect, and so while he may do some dumb things in the coming months, that doesn't mean in the long run he can't make it work. Now, I should say that while we watch Elon Musk at Twitter, he isn't the only one making cuts. Mark Zuckerberg has cut 11,000 jobs at Meta, which runs Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp. He says his predictions for growth were wrong, which in some ways leads us back to where we started this series.
Thank you.
Liz Truss had growth plans of her own for the UK's economic growth, but the reaction to those plans led to her standing down. And now we wrap up the series with another resignation. Sir Gavin Williamson has left the government. This is the same Gavin Williamson who, when Defence Secretary, said this after the Salisbury poisonings in 2018.
Frankly, Russia should go away, it should shut up.
It's the same Gavin Williamson who, the next year, was sacked after being accused of leaking details of a National Security Council meeting, something he denied. And he'd be back, this time as Education Secretary during the pandemic, when students had their grades marked down by an algorithm. A year later, he'd be out of the government again. Now, 2 weeks ago, Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. He promised a new government with integrity, professionalism and accountability. And he appointed Gavin Williamson as Cabinet Minister without portfolio. And now Gavin Williamson is being accused by colleagues of bullying, of telling one civil servant to slit their throat, and of sending abusive messages after not getting an invite to the Queen's memorial service. He wasn't sacked by the Prime Minister, but on Tuesday he resigned, denying bullying, saying he'd apologised and that he wants to clear his name. And on Wednesday, Mr Sunak gave his side of the story.
Mr Speaker, I obviously regret appointing someone who has had to resign in these circumstances.
And so, decisions and consequences continue to ricochet through UK politics, as they do through American politics, climate change, the World Cup, even Elon Musk's Twitter feed. Till next time, goodbye.